Hello, welcome back. Christopher Taylor with Sovereign Harmony. Good to see you as we shift into the fall season here. I'm in Carlsbad, California, where it's a little less noticeable with the shift in seasons, but I actually I had my window open, and this morning I noticed it was pretty chilly. Got down to like 50-ish. I think that's pretty chilly even no matter where you're from. After summertime, 50 is pretty cold. But I felt it. So starting to feel that shift. We just had the equinox when the sun entered Libra here just the other day. Today is Tuesday, September 26th. So I think it was 3 days ago. I can't remember if it was Friday or Saturday. I think it was last Friday that we had the equinox. But anyway, that is the signifier of the shift from one season to another. So now that the sun is in Libra, we're officially on the other side of the equinox. So now the daytime is shorter in the northern hemisphere and longer than the nighttime in the southern hemisphere. And so for us in the northern hemisphere, this is moving into fall. Things are starting to settle down a little bit. I just made a bone broth yesterday, and I just had some for lunch today, and it was really, really good. That's something really nourishing for this time of year. If you're into Ayurvedic medicine, bone broths contain a lot of minerals. This time of year is when our bodies tend to be stripped of minerals from basically sweating all summer, being in the heat. We're a little bit, mineral deprived this time of year, generally speaking. So, in Ayurveda, they refer to that as the Vata season. So we're in Vata season, and Vata requires, more mineralization of the body, adding more to the body, in other words. So it's that time of year, and it's good. It's good to nourish yourself. But astrologically speaking, so I don't have a lot to say today. I didn't really have a plan. I just had an impulse because I had some time off, and I was like, it's time for a video. So it's going to be a little more impromptu, and I'm going to just share a few things about some major shifts in planets that are happening over the next couple of months, over the next few months, really. But just to recap, so we've been through. I think the last time I was on was just before the eclipses in August, and the eclipses. It's pretty incredible. After that, August 21st eclipse, the total solar eclipse in the United States. It's like all hell broke loose after that with wildfires and hurricanes and now earthquakes in Mexico. It seems like immediately as soon as that happened, it was also that whole, to whatever degree it's real, but the threat of nuclear war with North Korea. I mean, it's obviously media hype, but there's always some degree of truth in what's being reported, whether or not the level or intensity of truth is accurate or not. But the point is, things have gotten pretty volatile. It's kind of almost like it opened up a door. And I feel like in people's lives, too, on a personal level, there's been almost like a shift into a new potential. But there's not quite a way to put our finger on what that is. But there's a sense that we've gotten past something, that we're done with something, and that at this point we are in a new window of time. And so just run with that. That's pretty cool. It's time for that. There's nothing abnormal about feeling that way. It's just where we're at. And along with that, we do have some shifts coming up with some planets. And so I want to talk about that, especially Jupiter. I've been talking about Jupiter for the last year in Libra, especially in its relationship with Venus when they joined each other late summer of 2016, and they've been dancing together with Venus's retrograde and Jupiter's retrograde. They opposed each other in May, and then they kind of wrapped up their relationship a little bit here starting in August, right around these eclipses. So the lessons have been learned, essentially. And these lessons have a lot to do with really what the theme of my offerings are, is this idea of sovereignty within relationship, the idea of selfhood and boundaries, and being able to relate authentically with others, which you can't do unless you are relating authentically with yourself first, being honest with yourself first. And so that is where we're at. We've gone through this lesson for the last year, and it hasn't been the easiest set of lessons over this past year. But like I said, now with this window beyond this August 21st eclipse, it feels like over the last several weeks, even though the world seems to be going haywire, but again, it's so that is a matter of presentation and perception. But in our lives, it feels like things are almost coming together. Like it's like we're done with that lesson. And so Jupiter will have a few more weeks, actually just a couple more weeks left in Libra. So today's September 26th, and on October 10th, just a couple weeks from now, it will enter Scorpio for about a year. And so we'll be completely done. But right now, Jupiter is wrapping up some of the major aspects it made with the planets. Like it just recently wrapped up its square to Pluto in Capricorn, and that was in August. And it wrapped up its sextile to Saturn in Sagittarius recently. And right now, it is still in an opposition. In fact, the final exact aspect of Jupiter opposite Uranus is this week. I believe it's tomorrow, the 27th. It is. It is tomorrow, the 27th. So that signifies the final round of that lesson. And so, again, this all goes back to what I just spoke about. It's like changing our own set of rules of what we believe we're capable of and how we live by and how we relate to others. And so by changing that within, it changes how our dynamic is with others. And so trying to find this balance with others based on this new authentic self has been the theme. So not letting ourselves be eliminated in any kind of relationship, and just making sure we're authentic. That's been a huge part of this. And so what we'll do with that is we'll be taking those lessons now that we have a sense of who we are and how to balance ourselves with others. As Jupiter dives into Scorpio, it's going to get interesting, because Scorpio is a sign that has to do with sort of sharing and merging and understanding the difference between what's mine and what's yours and what's ours. Okay? And so that's going to be the thing. We're going to be expanding and growing in that theme. So now that we have a sense of self and how to balance ourselves with others, we're able to go deeper with others. We're able to form alliances and allegiances with others. And so on a personal level, this is, the idea of maybe diving into a new romance, but also on a business level, it's diving into new partnerships that require us to maintain ourselves, but also trust others. Trust is a huge theme of Scorpio as well. So we're expanding our ability to trust by taking risks in choosing to trust others that are, part of what we are merging into. Okay, so that's going to be the major theme from the fall of 2017 right through the summer into early fall 2018 with Jupiter and Scorpio. So expect more merging, more sharing, more risk-taking in terms of trust. So that is really what this is, and we couldn't do that without all these lessons we've had here with Jupiter in Libra and the Venus dance, and coming to our authenticity, because there's no way we can really share ourselves if we don't really know what we're sharing. And so now that we know, we know what we can share, we know where our boundaries lie, and that's what we're ready for, to kind of dive into that. Just a couple months after Jupiter enters Scorpio, and again that'll be on October 10th, Saturn's going to change signs too. It's been in Sagittarius for the last 2 years. So it's been this theme of essentially focus on our future and getting serious about what direction we're headed and staying on course with regards to what, where we're trying to head. And so obviously coming up to challenges and whatnot, and having to trust when it seems like we're taking off course with different involvements and things that have disrupted our lives, or apparently disrupted our lives, but in some ways have helped us redirect and take control of our direction. Okay, and that's really what the theme of Saturn and Sag has been. When it enters Capricorn, that's the sign that Saturn rules, is Capricorn, and it has to do with order and structure and organizations, etc. And this is on a global level, this is a precarious time, because Saturn enters Capricorn. It'll be there for about 2.5 years, and it's on the tail end of that when it will run into Pluto, and when Jupiter will actually move through Scorpio, then it'll move through Sagittarius, and then it will move into Capricorn in a couple of years. So a couple of years from now, in other words, what's starting is this theme, this Capricorn theme, is changing of the guard, is changing of organizational structure and how the world is managed. Okay. So Saturn's going to enter Capricorn again. It's going to be just before Christmas, I think, like December 19th, 20th, right around the winter solstice, actually, in the Northern Hemisphere. So it's going to be right around that time. But it's going to be a 2.5 year process. Pluto has been in Capricorn since 2008. Okay, and that's a 16-year period. So we're not quite through it yet. It's not going to be out of Capricorn until 2024. But so it's sitting there in Capricorn at about 17 degrees right now, I think 16, 17, something like that. Yeah, so about halfway through it. But Saturn will catch up to it in about a year and a half, 2 years. And Jupiter will be right on its tail, right around that time. It's going to be 2020. In fact, it's the first couple of months of 2020, which sounds far off, but it's actually just over 2 years from now. Remember, 2018 is coming up here in a few months. So in just over 2 years, we have this kind of merger of Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, all in Capricorn. And that is going to be a very intense time of, again, changing of the guard. You know, it's going to be a crazy election year in the U.S. for sure in 2020. It just happens to line up, you know, in that way. But with Pluto and Capricorn, you know, we're just in a general period of total destruction and transformation of how the world is ruled, how order and organization is structured. So just to go back, I think I've talked about this before, and I'm going to be talking about this tomorrow night at Eve in Encinitas, California at 8 p.m. If you're in the area, I will be doing a talk on what I call the power generations, and I'll put some links down below this video. But just talking about, you know, who's who, like when you were born, pretty much people born between the mid-1960s and the mid-1990s, which is, you know, a 30-year swath of time of people from their early 20s to their early 50s now. And this is the core generation, and it's kind of split into a few nodes, but these are the ones that are going to change everything, and it's going to time perfectly with where we're at, which is Pluto and Capricorn, which is a time of change. If you go back to the last couple of Pluto and Capricorn periods, and they don't happen very often because Pluto takes 248 years to go around the zodiac. So the last time Pluto went through Capricorn, or I should say 2 times ago, was the early 1500s. And that was when, after 1500 years of Christianity being, you know, one thing, was what we call it now Catholic, the Catholic Church was ruling the world essentially, 1500 years. And then someone had the audacity during that time when Pluto was in Capricorn to nail something on the door of the church, which essentially led to the Protestant Reformation and the breakdown of that order and structure into you know, a different style than it ever was before. And then the next trip of Pluto through Capricorn was 1762 to 1778. So there was one significant event, a signing of a Declaration of Independence, that happened toward the tail end of that in 1776, so the last couple of years, which led to the American Revolution. And pretty much what it really led to was the end of monarchies, because that was the really order and structure that was beginning to fall at that time, because monarchies ruled every part of the earth. And so suddenly there was this one place on earth that didn't have one. And it's ever since then, you don't see new monarchies coming up. Either they're still holding on, or they're getting rid of them altogether. And so in the last 230, 40 years, we have, you know, it's been that trend toward liberation. Again, it's sort of the same theme that happened in the Protestant Reformation, this liberation from this rigid Catholic Church into other forms of worship. Now this further breakdown. And so now we're in this other period, this current period, which 2008 to 2024 is Pluto and Capricorn right now. So we are in one of these. In my opinion, this has a lot to do with, because right now, you know, the world isn't run by monarchies, it isn't run by politicians, it's run by bankers and the systems that produce what we know of as money and what has value and whatnot. So I think it's the entire banking system that is going to be in complete collapse and rebuild. Again, in both of those time periods previously, it could have easily been perceived as the end of something and chaos breaking loose, but in reality it was the chaos that was necessary to bring about the advancement that we now, in retrospect, can see. And so the same thing is happening now. And when we get to 2020, especially the period from 2020 to 2025, roughly speaking, it's going to be pretty intensely transformational in whatever form that takes. But there's really no way around it, especially in the US. So Pluto was in Capricorn, late Capricorn, because Pluto was in late Capricorn in 1776. So when the declaration was signed, Pluto was about 28 degrees Capricorn. It will be back to 28 degrees Capricorn for the first time since then, over the years of 2022 and 2023. So again, that sounds far off, but it's really only about 4 or 5 years from now, if you really think about it, because we're almost in 2018. So that is the period that is going to be similar to an individual's experience with a Saturn return. With a Saturn return, it's once every 29 years, so at about age 29, that's when a human goes through their Saturn return, which is a maturing phase. You're maturing and grounding into your body, into your life that you intended on a soul level to be moving through. So a lot of times it can include disruptions and recreations of our direction just because of that. So anyone that's around age 29, 30, you're going through your Saturn return, and it's just a normal transition. In my opinion, that's the move into adulthood. We're not adults until that point. And anyway, but from a national perspective, you can have a nation last long enough for Pluto to come around again. Human doesn't get a Pluto return. Pluto, unless you live to 248, you're not going to get a Pluto return. But the United States will, assuming it's still around in a few years. But for all intents and purposes, let's believe that it will. But at that time, there's going to be a total death and rebirth of the nation, as there is a death and rebirth of the global financial system. And considering that the United States of America is a huge, I don't want to call it, huge arm of the global banking system, we'll just say that, it makes sense that the United States would be affected by that kind of a shift. And so it's nothing to be afraid of. It's just time for that transition. And yeah, the United States position in the world is going to be very different 10 years from now than it is, right now. That's just the way it is. Doesn't mean total destruction or this and that and war. It doesn't mean that. It just means it's going to be different, and it's going to be appropriate for where we're headed. And it's these generations that are now in their early 20s to early 50s, again, that I'm talking about tomorrow night. They are, and over the next 10 years, they'll go from their early 20s, early 50s to early 30s to early 60s. And so we're really talking about the earliest part, or the youngest part of this transitioning into adulthood, right around the time that the United States and the world, etc., are transitioning into a new forms of structure in society, you see? And everyone older than that, the older parts of that generation, myself included, we are moving into leadership roles and things, and so decision-making capacities. And so we're going to see a very, very different world in, say, 20 years than we see now. It's hard to believe, it's hard to imagine, but just, I'll go over this tomorrow night if you're there, but, the cycle we're coming out of is still lingering. There's still lingering aspects of the energy that we've left behind with Regulus in Leo, which exited Leo and entered Virgo in 2011. So we're really a good 6 years into Regulus in Virgo, but it's a 2,000-year transit, so 6 years is nothing, and we're still in the very beginning stages of this shift. But we've left behind a certain energy that allowed for inequality, let's just say that allowed for masculine dominance, that allowed for war, in annihilation, complete annihilation, like in the form of nuclear war. But we're entering a much more peaceful energy when it comes to power structures, okay? It's just, and it takes a certain group of souls to transition it, and that's what we're in now. That's what we're in. But anyway, so just to give, that's more of a 30,000 foot view of the astrology that's going on. Usually mine are a little bit more focused on right now in the next couple of months, but this is, looking at the Jupiter shift into Scorpio, and then, Saturn following up in December into Capricorn, and what that signifies for the next several years. And, it's just good to know what's happening here in the background. So anyway, if you have any questions, let me know. And my name is Christopher Taylor, again. And also, I am doing a reading special. I'll put a link to this as well below. And so if you get me between now, today's Tuesday, September 26th, and Tuesday, October 3rd, if we can schedule something between those dates, because I will be taking off on October 4th, and I won't be able to schedule anything. But if it's between September 26th and October 3rd, we got a reading special going on. So it's $60 for a personal consultation, and I'm doing $90 special for what I call creating compatibility. So creating compatibility is really what I'm going to start refocusing my business on. And this is, creating compatibility between two individuals in a personal relationship, creating compatibility in group situations, in the case of a business team or an organizational team, And also communities. So as we see communities, new communities being formed as things break down, it becomes important to recognize our differences and how to create compatibility, understanding those differences. And that is really what my aim is going to be over the next years. I don't know what to say, but I feel like that's going to be my role. And so anyway, doing some $90 special on the creating compatibility between yourself and another, or if you have a group situation, you're in San Diego, we can do that. And then $60 for personal reading. So thanks a lot for listening, and feel free to share, and feel free to show up tomorrow night at Eve in Encinitas if you're going to be around town. And do take advantage of my specials here over the next week if that interests you. Thanks a lot, and I will see you next time. Bye.